Mr Speaker, I move that this House record its deep regret at the passing of the Honourable Dr Moses Moss-Cass on the 26th of February 2022, former Minister for the Environment, Minister for the Media and Member for Maribyrnong, and to place on record its appreciation for his service to Australia and offer its heartfelt sympathy to his family in their bereavement. And in doing so, Mr Speaker, I wish to acknowledge the Treasurer, who would have liked to have been here today for this motion, who was obviously unable to be here because of the budget later tonight, wanted me to pass on his express condolences for the family of Moss-Cass. The life of Moss-Cass is one of heroic purpose. His family were Jewish and travelled to Australia after the Bialystok pogrom of 1906. Australia was safety, a land far from persecution, a land where the individual was respected and a place where people could be free to be themselves. Moss's father, Ben, was a doctor, and when Moss was aged 6, Ben took him to see his first surgery, and climbing on his father's shoulders, he watched the delicate procedure. The seed of wonder was planted, and Moss eventually studied medicine. A man who spent much of his life dreaming of healing the world understood it would always started with healing just one person. He was a man of science who also believed in the heroic. On his third attempt, including even challenging the great Sir Robert Menzies and Kooyong, Mr Speaker, as well as contesting the seat of Latrobe in 1969, on his third attempt he was elected as the member for Maribyrnong. Mr Speaker, in 1972, with the election of the Whitlam government, Moss was sworn in as the Minister for the Environment. The minister was known to have disagreements with the Prime Minister, so much so he was sometimes called the Minister for Lost Causes. Nevertheless, that didn't stop him championing what he believed. Moss shepherded through Parliament one of the country's most significant pieces of environmental legislation, the Environment Protection Act, a forever legacy on his part. This opened the way for public consultation and debate around the environmental impact of development. That change laid the groundwork for the end of sand mining on Fraser Island and government protection for the Great Barrier Reef that was ultimately delivered by the Fraser government. Mr Speaker, he also went on as Minister for Media, and he remarked particularly on those issues, Mr Speaker, when he was involved in issuing an experimental radio licence that laid the basis for today's thriving community radio sector and ushered in the ABC's youth-orientated Double J station, obviously becoming Triple J later. As well, Moss championed many of the great social changes of the 1960s and 1970s, reaching across the aisle, indeed seconding the motions, Mr Speaker, to decriminalise homosexuality by John Gorton in 1973. Mr Speaker, throughout his life of advocacy, Moss was supported by his wife Shirley. They were married an astonishing 67 years, an enormous achievement, Mr Speaker, and obviously a relationship for the ages. The tribute that best honours Moss-Cass is one that was written by his son Dan, and Dan wrote of his father. He demonstrated a purposeful life. His luminous intelligence, honesty and passion for justice opened you. He could imagine a green and fair world and did as much as anyone else to bring it about. He could talk politics and solve problems and believed everyone had something valuable to contribute. He taught us that collaborative thinking is what we do. To live is to work it all out, how we care for each other and the planet. And so to Moss's wife Shirley, his children Dan and Naomi, and his grandchildren, I extend the sympathies of the government and the Australian people to them and their great loss. May Dr Moss-Cass rest in peace.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition, has the call.
With green eyes that smiled and a beard that looked like an heirloom from Abraham Lincoln, Moss-Cass was a rare combination. A politician who could capture hearts figuratively and mend them literally. He helped develop open heart surgery techniques. He built our first heart-lung machine. A fitting trajectory for a man who, as a boy, had sat on his father's shoulders watching as he performed surgery. Moss's parents, Ben and Esther, met and married in Perth, but were from families that had fled anti-Jewish pogroms in what is now Poland, but then still part of the Russian Empire. Somewhere along the way, a Polish fortune teller promised Esther 3 angels. She got 3 sons. Moss, or Moses Henry Cass, was the first cab off the rank, born in Narrogin in the West Australian wheatbelt, who would eventually marry artist and writer Shirley Shulman. It was love at first sight, and for Moss, an entree into a world of artists, filmmakers and bohemians. As their son Dan wrote recently in the Saturday paper, Mum and Dad were dreamers and rebels. They had powerful imaginations working in different registers. Moss would carefully sneak up on a difficult truth. Shirley would ambush it with a joke. After a stint in London, Moss was recruited to head the Trade Union Clinic and Research Centre, a community health facility set up by the Meat Workers Union in the Melbourne suburb of Footscray. Its aim was simple but noble, providing workers with free treatment and promoting preventative care. When political life beckoned, Moss aimed high. His first attempt to get into Parliament saw him running for Kooyong, where the incumbent was Robert Menzies. This might have struck some as being like trying to remove a mountain, but Moss did well enough to be emboldened. His tilt at another Liberal-held seat proved more fruitful. In preparation for the battle for Maribyrnong, he enlisted Philip Adams as his campaign manager. Philip suggested the slogan, "I don't mind who you vote for as long as you think about it." Maribyrnong has never been Liberal since. Moss used his first speech to Parliament to argue for the decriminalisation of abortion. His words were powerful, sometimes harrowing, all born from his own experience as a doctor. He introduced Gough Whitlam to the health economists who would design Medibank, the forerunner to Medicare. He worked to decriminalise homosexuality. He showed impeccable taste by loving and protecting 2JJ, that rogue child of the ABC family. He persuaded Australia's media barons to sign up to a press council. As Australia's first ever Environment and Conservation Minister, he laid the groundwork that protected the Great Barrier Reef, saved Fraser Island from sand mining, and curtailed uranium mining in Kakadu. In August 1975, the Bulletin gave a gleefully forensic account of the time that Moss, as media minister, encouraged the ABC to be more radical. ABC General Manager Talbot Duckmanton sat in on the meeting but remained silent throughout. A producer at the meeting said he started off sitting in a chair with his hand to his mouth. Gradually, he sunk lower in the chair and his hand moved across until it seemed he was holding his head in his hand. The journalists themselves were a lot keener. Surely that was the mark of the right person in the job. His life after Parliament was long and rich, and was many things along the way. Gardener, photographer, music lover, conservationist, progressive, an atheist who never lost sight of his Jewish cultural identity, a source of entertainment, guidance and love for his grandchildren and great-grandchild, a man who knew loss when his daughter Deborah died, a man who knew love. Now that Moss's long, rich life has drawn to a close, our hearts are with his family, especially with wife Shirley, his children Dan and Naomi. May he rest in peace.
Yeah. As a mark of respect to the memory of the Honourable Dr. Moses Henry Cass, I ask all present to rise in their places. I thank the House.